there and welcome back to some more Forza Top Gear laps. Today we are rounding out our more sports car trilogy by taking a look at the modern sports cars. Our first car, well, stretches the definition of modern, but go with it. This is the 2000 Plymouth Prowler, 253 horsepower, 255 foot-pound torque, 2,838 pounds of weight. The Plymouth Prowler comes from that special time in Chrysler when they approved a bunch of weird ideas, and the Prowler was one of them. Yes, this is a real car that you could drive on the streets. Well, you can still drive on the streets now, of course, it's still road legal even 20 years on. The weird thing with the Prowler is it never quite lived up to the way it looked because it had a V6 engine out of a typical Chrysler family saloon car and only a 4-speed automatic gearbox, which is not too good. Now, the interesting thing driving this car in Forza, and even some reports I've heard about real life, the V6 engine in this car is actually quite good. In Forza, it is actually quite a fast car, in all honesty. It still feels pretty fast. 253 horsepower isn't too much to write home about, but it is pretty light. The big issue with this car, of course, is that 4-speed gearbox. It's just too longer geared. It's still a quick car, again, as I said, but that gearbox really does make it suffer. It really makes you wonder what this car would be like with even a 5-speed manual, in all honesty, or a 5-speed auto, either a good automatic, would have probably made this car better, just an extra gear, but alas, it doesn't happen. But still, it is a very good car to drive, and surprisingly quick. Next up, we have the 2000 Nissan Silvia Spec-R, 253 horsepower, 203 foot-pound torque, 2,734 pounds of weight. This is the lightest car we have here today, not too far off that Prowler though. The Silvia is a bit of a weird one, really. If it wasn't for sort of drift culture keeping this car in the modern eye, the Silvia probably would have been largely forgotten, which is a bit strange when you consider this was one of the longest running Nissan nameplates. I think it was 38 years or something the Nissan Silvia survived. It went from 1966 to 2002, for what I remember. Of course, we have pretty much every generation, or every main generation, of Silvia ever produced, which is interesting. This is, of course, being an S15. This is the last generation of the Nissan Silvia, easily my favourite of the Nissan Silvias. I'm not a huge fan of the Silvia in general, but the S15, you know, it looks pretty good. It's not quite as bland looking as, say, something like the S14 or S13. As far as it goes to drive, it is pretty decent, although I will say the rear end definitely kicks out on this car, even in stock trim, even in this 250 horsepower standard road going variant. You can still feel the rear end kicking out, sort of, you know, hinting at the potential this car has as a drift car. That's what these are mainly used as. Don't get me wrong, you can probably build a decent circuit racer out of it as well, but most people will opt to go the drifting route, and who can really blame them with the way this thing sort of slides around. Speaking of sliding around, the 2005 BMW M3, 333 horsepower, 262 foot-pound torque, 3,415 pounds of weight, arguably the most popular M3 ever made. Could easily be said, really. This is the one that sort of everyone seems to gravitate towards. If you think M3 in your mind, for me personally, this is what I think. As much as I'm not a massive fan of the E46 these days, it is still the first car I think of course, Need for Speed Most Wanted, and this was the first proper M3 introduced to North America, so that also helped the appeal of this car. Yeah, again, I'm not a massive E46 person, I'm not a massive BMW fan in general, but, you know, it's a pretty decent enough car, and again, it certainly does have some widespread popularity. I know there's a lot of fan of these cars out there. As far as this goes to drive, it is strange to drive. Very, very snappy on the rear end, it has to be said. It doesn't feel quite as natural or have as good a feel for it as the E36 did. It does feel a little bit weird. Part of it might be down to the gearbox. This is the SMG semi-automatic gearbox, so that might make it feel a bit snappy when it comes to shifting gears, but the rear end on this just seems to really just want to step out at the most random of times. Very strange car to drive, it has to be said. Next up, we have the 2009 Honda S2000 CR, 237 horsepower, 162 foot-pound torque, 2,813 pounds of weight. This is the least torquey car here today, perhaps unsurprisingly considering it's a Honda. Yeah, despite that though, the Honda S2000 is a pretty exquisite car. We're not exactly expecting a super quick lap time out this, especially considering some of the cars it's up against today. But the S2000 should still put on a good showing, at least I hope, because I really like the S2000. That probably shouldn't surprise anyone. If you've been around this channel for any length of time, you'll know I'm a huge Honda fanboy. But yeah, no, the S2000's great. I love the way it looks. Out of all the convertible sports cars in the world, this is probably one of the only ones I'd actually pay money for. It has one of the all-time great engines. I forgot the engine code for it exactly, but super, super high revving engine. Just an excellent, excellent vehicle. As far as it goes to driving game, it is excellent, as you would expect from a Honda, especially an S2000. It hasn't got too much power. These things are notoriously known for their excellent handling, and yeah, this does carry over in Forza. The only minor complaint I might have about this car is the gear ratios do feel a little bit too long for this car, really. Again, you know, it does mean it can stay in the VTEC power band for a lot longer and so on, but you'd think a car like this would have sort of shorter gear ratios, allowing it to be a little bit quicker. Not sure what that's all about, but yeah, either way, the S2000 is as exquisite as always. Next up, we have the 2010 Audi TT RS Coupe, 335 horsepower, 332 foot-pound torque, 3,294 pounds of weight. The TT RS, an often forgotten car, I find, which is kind of surprising when you consider what it is. You know, the Audi TT, it's considered one of the more iconic cars in terms of Audi's range. I know the modern TT RS, or the modern TT, gets overlooked a bit. The RS not so much, because that's sort of more of a Cayman rival. But, you know, when the TT first came out, it was sort of a style icon, if you will, although I'm not a huge fan of it. This second-gen TT, probably my favourite of all the TTs. I think it looks great. And this RS trim really is mad. 5-cylinder turbo engine, 335 horsepower, 4-wheel drive. You can't really go wrong. As far as it goes to drive, well, it is typical Audi stuff. It's got understeer, but it is overall a pretty great car to drive. If you're not too much a fan of understeer, and if that's not your preferred method of going, you prefer oversteer, you will be very disappointed by the TTRS, because it doesn't give you all the oversteer fun you like. But if you're like me and you don't mind a bit of understeer, the TTRS really is, you can't go wrong with it. Again, that noise, 5-cylinder turbocharged engine, probably the best sounding car here today. It's just an exquisite thing, if you ask me. Next up, a front-wheel drive entry, the 2011 Falcon Scirocco R, 261 horsepower, 258 foot-pound torque, 2,963 pounds of weight. I guess technically you could make the argument that it is not a sports car, it is actually a hot hatchback, but Volkswagen would tell you it's a sports car, so I'm going to tell you it's a sports car because in the Hot Hatch episode we had Golfs, and now we have Scirocco for this. Yeah, the Scirocco R, essentially what they did is they took a Mark V Golf platform, which is what the Scirocco has always been based on. The R has the engine out of a Seat Leon Cupra R, I think, which actually made more power than the GTI Golf for whatever reason. And so that's what we end up with here. Not a huge fan of the Scirocco, I'll be honest. I'd rather have a Golf because it's more practical, you can get more doors, and I'm not a huge fan of the way the Scirocco looks. But it does come in green, which is always worth a lot of bonus points in my book. As far as it goes to drive, it's a pretty solid car. The diff is a little bit fiddly. It is front-wheel drive, unlike something like a Golf R. The Scirocco never really got four-wheel drive, which I guess is a little bit strange, but I guess they wanted to focus more on the Golf R. Yeah, no, the differential can cause some issues, but for a front-wheel drive car of this age especially, it's pretty alright. Yeah, no, I enjoyed driving the Scirocco R. It's nice to have sort of a little bit of hot hatchy fun in this world of sports cars. Speaking of hot hatches, the 2014 Honda Civic Si Coupe technically isn't one either. 205 horsepower, 174 foot-pound torque, 2,877 pounds of weight. Nope, this is a coupe. And again, like the Scirocco, this is one of those weird cars where it's kind of hard to figure out. Is it a sports car? Not really, but Honda would probably call it a sports car. I'm going to call it a sports car for the purposes of today, and also because unless we do an episode called Cheap Economy Cars, or Slightly Hotted Up Economy Cars, which would literally be this Civic and the Dodge Dart GT, you know, you can't really classify this car in any other way. I like this Civic Si Coupe though, I think it looks good. Same engine that's in my real life Accord as well, K24. It's a little bit higher up on the power, and it's not mated to an automatic gearbox like my car is. This one's got a 6-speed manual. Yeah, no, I like the Civic Si Coupe. I wish we got these because they look kind of fun and funky and different. and yeah, a little bit less ungainly than our Civic looked. As far as this one goes to drive, it is a great handling car. Again, it's a Honda, it's front-wheel drive. This is what they're good at, building economy cars that are actually quite fun to drive. It does have a light rear end. You could take that either way. You could either say it feels a little bit unstable at high speed, because it does, or you could say it's a little bit more fun. You can chuck it in some corners and have some fun with it that way. Whichever way you want to drive it, it's still pretty good. You know, don't be put off by that light rear end. There's plenty of stuff you can do to get rid of it, and even so, it's not that big a deal anyway. And finally today, the 2016 BMW M2 Coupe, 365 horsepower, 369 foot-pounds of torque, 3,450 pounds of weight. This is the most powerful, most torquey, and the heaviest car we have here today. I forgot to mention the Civic was the lowest powered either, but we'll gloss over that. No, the BMW M2. This is a car which I'm surprised we haven't got to sooner, considering this is by far and away my favourite of the modern BMW range. I do really like the M2. I think it's a great looking car. It just offers that great balance, you know, front end and rear wheel drive. It's a bit of old school fun. A lot of the BMWs these days have moved away from that. This car seems to be more, you know, a little bit more special than the typical BMW of today. Yeah, if I was going to buy a BMW, this would be it. As far as it goes to drive, it is a pretty good car to drive, it has to be said. Oversteer, as you'd expect from a BMW, is encountered in this one, but, you know, I mean, again, like the Civic, I guess that adds to the charm of it a little bit. In general, when it comes to German cars, you know, you go to Audi if you want something with a little bit of understeer but a lot of stability, and you go to BMW if you want something with a bit of oversteer, but they can be quick in the right hands. It really does depend which way you want to go on that one, and yeah, no. I prefer the way Audis drive, but the M2 is still a very good car to drive and one I enjoy because I really like the M2. Moving on to the leaderboard, unsurprisingly the M2 was the quickest car today, going with a conveniently on-brand 122.022. It's quicker than a Challenger Hellcat and an E60 M5. I wasn't expecting it to be quite that quick. Really quick car. It's, you know, it's not too far for Lotus and Vora either. Some serious time from that car. In 173rd place, we found the Audi TT RS Coupe with a 122.685, beating a Shelby GT500 by 1,000th of a second, and beating a Dodge Challenger as well in the process, although not quite as impressive as taking down a Hellcat. Still, the TT RS did quite well. In 183rd place, we find the BMW M3 with 123.177, just beats out a Mustang, Maserati Gran Turismo, Nissan 370Z, BMW Z3 M Coupe, which I believe used an older BMW chassis, but the engine from that M3, sorry, so that's kind of interesting. In 252nd place, we find the Volkswagen Scirocco R with a 126.064, beats out an Infiniti G37, Porsche 944 Turbo, a Volkswagen Golf R from the same vintage. Yeah, that again, a very quick time from the Scirocco. Wasn't expecting it to be quite that quick. Moving down once again, in 264th place, we find the Plymouth Prowler over 126.851, and just underneath that, in 265th place, the Honda S2000 CR with 126.895. I wasn't quite expecting the Prowler to be quicker than the S2000. I don't know whether to be angry about that or not, but yeah, no, that Prowler's a really good car, it has to be said. The S2000's good as well, but that Prowler, probably the most surprising thing here today. It's just such a good car to drive, and I can't explain why. In 281st place, we find the Nissan Silvia Spec-R with 127.463. Slightly beats out a Sierra Cosworth M635 CSI. Beats out a 300 ZX Twin Turbo, which is around the same time that car came out. An interesting beat for the Silvia Spec-R. And finally today, perhaps unsurprisingly, in 361st place, the Honda Civic Si Coupe with 130.630. Still goes in between some interesting cars. It gets beaten out by a Lamborghini Alpa, but it's quicker than a Lotus 11 and an Aston Martin DB5. Strange leaderboard this, but that's where it laid. So there you go, that is your look at some more modern sports cars. Join us next time, we're going to be taking a look at some more SUVs, because they're the flavour of the month at the moment. And join us for the Rivals episode, which is going to be very exciting. That is two British hypercars from two different eras going into battle with each other, so that should be a lot of fun. As said before, thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, farewell.
Where my hopes and dreams are going, I'll only pay. Got up in a wall that you are not part of. Eyes on the slit of your father.